record on this computer.
Go, perfect.
Recording, okay. Go ahead.
Alrighty, are we all set?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, let me share my screen one more time. Can everybody see it?
Yes.
Awesome. So I put together basically a slideshow about a lot of photos, and then I'll talk about every experience as kind of they come up on the slide. But I studied abroad in fall 2018. I was there from August until December, so I was there about 4.5 months, and it was a fantastic experience to say the least. So these first few photos are my main group that I was with, or my cohort. So I was studying abroad through Casa Adobe, which is this VU study center in Costa Rica. It's a little bit north of San Jose. And you can see Heidi Michelson is right here in the front of the photo on the right-hand side. She was our kind of coordinator, our site leader, our teacher and professor at times, and she was basically our guide through the whole experience. And then there was 3 other students with me, or kind of 3 other students. So there was 2 other students that were in my program, and there was 1 other student who was there as a teaching assistant. And he was doing his teaching internship through the Study Abroad Center, and he was the first student to do an international teaching semester for his undergraduate degree at VU. So we kind of had a very unique cohort, and we spent a lot of time together, both in class and outside of the class as well. So the main place that we took courses was the Universidad de Costa Rica, or the University of Costa Rica. We took most of our language courses there. So in the morning, we would take an 1.5-hour long grammar class. We would have a 20-minute break, and then we would have another 1.5-hour long conversation class, always in Spanish, no English. So it was very language intensive, trying to improve our fluidity in the Spanish language. And it was really fun. We got to meet a lot of other students from all over the world. I know I had students in my class that were from Brazil and Japan. There was a girl from Amsterdam. And then there were also students from Costa Rica that were learning English, and we would partner with their English class, and we would both be practicing our second languages with each other. So this was a really fantastic educational opportunity where I could learn Spanish, not just from a textbook or from a slideshow, but authentically practicing with native speakers. So my language ability improved tenfold because of this experience, and I learned so much faster, so much quicker, because I was just kind of surrounded by the language. So that was a really fantastic experience too. I think one of the most important aspects of my time in Costa Rica was my, was my internship. So I did an internship as a kind of a literacy intern slash teaching assistant, where I was working in a neighborhood called La Garfield, and I would come there every day, and it was just me and 1 other woman whose name was Marielos, and she taught anywhere between 25 to 60 kids for a day. And we would do Bible stories, and we would teach them the alphabet and how to read and math and things like that, because the school in La Carpio wasn't always the most accessible for some of the students, or the parents couldn't afford to send them or didn't send them. And it was just a good way to keep the kids kind of engaged, still learning in this community. It was mainly comprised of Nicaraguan migrants, and they lived right on a river, and they would cross the river every day to climb up a mountain to go pick coffee beans. And that's kind of how they made their living. And then they would come back every day, cross the river, and come back to La Carpio. So these are just some of the pictures of me and the kids that I got to work with all the time. So we got really close. We were jumping rope and playing games. And I was one of the first interns that they ever had that could actually speak Spanish. So I actually got to know the kids and play with them and talk to them. I would walk some of them home if they lived far away. I would do home visits sometimes to go make sure that the kids were getting home safe and lived in safe homes. So it was a really cool experience just to see a whole different experience of life and see how these children are living and just see the reality of it. Because as you can tell from the photos, it was a very impoverished area. A lot of these kids, their only dependable meal was with us at the school. And there was a family of 5 kids that all shared one pair of shoes. And so it was very heartbreaking at times. It was very emotional. It was very hard to process at times, but I think it was very necessary for me to see that, especially considering the vocation that I feel called to and the kind of things I want to do vocationally for my life. Seeing this firsthand was very impactful for me and definitely changed the course of what I planned to do after graduation. And then these photos right here are a little bit more of Los Grados. This is the part of the Garfield that I was working in. So in the very left-hand photo is the river that the parents would cross every day. And these are just the kids playing in it on one of our off days where we didn't have schoolwork. The photo in the middle actually was a really interesting story of there didn't have any sewage at the bottom of the hill, because if you live at the bottom of the hill, that's the most impoverished area. And the black water, or the sewage water, was running into the river where they're bathing and washing their clothes and getting water from. So we had to pick up rocks from all over the neighborhood, all over the riverbed, and we brought rocks up to block the sewer water so it wasn't running into the river. So we canceled school that day. We didn't have any lessons, and all of the kids helped to pick up all of these rocks, and it took us about 4 hours. So it just kind of goes to show that it is a very tight-knit community, and when something needs to get done, everybody kind of comes together and joins in. So that was a really fun day, even though it was not really what we were definitely planning on doing that day. And then the picture on the very right-hand side is Los Grados, or the steps. To get down to the school where I was working in, I had to climb down 317 steps every single day. And if you can see, I know it's kind of tiny, but this person in the blue is about halfway up the steps. And this little person all the way up here is at the very, very top. So I had to climb up and down these steps every single day just to get to the school, where I would then start jumping rope and running around and playing tag and playing soccer. So it was definitely a workout to get to and from my internship. And it just, again, goes to show kind of the infrastructure of this community. This is one of the photos in our classroom itself. We had a missionary group from Michigan come in, and I had to translate because I was the only one that spoke English and the only one that also spoke Spanish. So it was definitely an interesting experience because I am not a professional translator. And I was kind of trying to translate for about 40 different people in every conversation all the time. And it was a very eye-opening experience of just how kind of difficult it can be to be a translator and how overwhelming it can be, especially for an undergraduate student. But it was really fun getting to know these people and getting to see that this group is actually the group that funds our school, and they're through a Presbyterian church. And it was very nice to see that they not only just donated money, but they came and they invested their time to get to know the students, get to know Marielos and myself, and they were very interested and very dedicated to this cause. And it was something that they were very proud of, and this ministry for this church was very important to them. So that was a very nice thing to see as well. This is one of the trips that I got to go on. Kat probably knows a lot more about this basilica than I do, but this is kind of the national cathedral, the Basilica of Our Señora de los Ángeles. It's my favorite chapel that I went to in my whole time in Costa Rica. I did a lot of traveling to churches and going to different worships, different worship styles. I went to an LGBTQ plus gay and transgender kind of service. I went to a Presbyterian service. I went to a Lutheran service. I went to a lot of Catholic services. It was very interesting for me as a theology major and a Christian to go and see how kind of their faith life is different from ours, and in some ways that it's similar as well. So I think this is a really important landmark that I got to see. And often people will do pilgrimages up to the building. So you'll see people like on their knees, kind of crawling or slowly walking, sometimes on their belly, into the church itself. So it's a really important site for the Christian community in Costa Rica, and it was probably one of my favorite spots as well. This is another day trip that I took. This was to Monteverde, and this is kind of the cloud forest. It's a little bit farther up north. It's in Guanacaste, but I got to zip line. I did the South American largest zip line in chacos and sandals, because I didn't know I needed tennis shoes. I wasn't planning to zip line that day, but we decided to have an adventure, and it was a lot of fun. It was really great to see all of the nature and all of the animals that are down there, because they're completely different from what we find up here in Indiana. I got to meet a lot of people. I met people from Denmark and I think somebody from Sweden, not to mention all of the native Costa Rican people that were working there that day as well. Also in Monteverde, I walked the Continental Divide. So this is kind of where the rainfall either falls on one side of the mountain or the other, and then that kind of washes down throughout the rest of the country. So this was a really cool place. It was very shallow air. It was kind of hard to breathe at the top, but me and my friend Jessie hiked this whole thing together for about 3 hours just to kind of see all of the nature and the beauty of Costa Rica that is always highly talked about and highly praised. This is, again, some of the other nature that we saw. These are more of the animals that we saw. We saw, on the very top left, we saw a sloth, which is very hard to see this up close because the sloths are normally up high in the trees and they like to camouflage themselves and hide themselves. But every, I believe it's week or every 2 weeks, they come down and they actually poop on the floor of the forest or the jungle, and then they climb back up. And they're only down there for about an hour every week to 2 weeks, so it's very rare to see a sloth like this. So we got to see this sloth about 5 feet, 6 feet away from us, which was really, really cool because I had never seen a sloth before. We got to see snakes and salamanders and frogs and all kinds of different animals. We saw the white-faced monkey. They tried to steal our food. They're notorious thieves. So it's very important you never leave your food or any of your belongings unattended because the monkeys will come and take it. And then on the right-hand side, this little boy, we were at a reservation, I believe, and this little boy was part of an indigenous community, and he had accidentally, we were playing, and he had accidentally bit my fellow student, Jessie, and we were kind of reprimanding him of like, it's not very nice to bite people and things like that, and he immediately ran away and grabbed a chicken and brought it back to Jessie as an apology and was trying to give her this little chicken. So it was just a very heartwarming experience. It was very cute. It was a very good way of us to be able to use the language to bond with this little boy, as he had never really seen anybody that looked like us, and he doesn't really see a lot of outsiders. So it was a really cool experience just to see all of this nature and just how the community is interacting with nature and how close they really are with it. This is another one of my favorite parts of Costa Rica, is the street art. You can see it in the neighborhoods, in downtown, all throughout the highways. It's one of my favorite parts, is just to see kind of, some of them are political, some of them are about, some of these are taking care of nature, some of these are about corruption. They always have an underlying meaning, and a lot of times they are very deep and they're also very beautiful. So I loved to take pictures of all of the different kind of street murals and things like that as I saw. So these left two are from La Carpio, which was that Nicaraguan migrant community that I was working in. This orange wall was in front of Casa Adobe, which was our study center. And it reads, "You can't buy the wind, you can't buy the soul, you can't buy the rain, you can't buy the heat, you can't buy the clouds, you can't buy the colors, you can't buy my happiness, and you can't buy my pain." So that's one of my favorite ones. I used to walk by that every day. And I just really like seeing how the community of Costa Rica, either small towns, neighborhoods, or even in big cities, there was a lot of these kind of commentary of kind of society or politics or things like that, kind of through art in a very beautiful way. And it's very legal. No, it's people, I never saw anybody getting arrested for it, and I saw a lot of people going out and painting walls and murals and things like that all the time. So this was really cool for me to see as well. And then last but not least, I have a few pictures of my host family that I got to stay with, because I think that was the most impactful part of my entire time, was getting to live with a family, because not only was I learning in Spanish, I was traveling a city in Spanish, but I lived with a family that only spoke Spanish. So I was surrounded by the language all the time, and my only way to communicate with the people I was living with was through a second language. So it forced me to learn really, really quick. So I had two brothers and a sister, and my parents as well that were there. And it was the same age differences as my family. So the oldest was a brother who was 23, and then a sister who was about 20, and then a younger brother who was about 7 at the time, which is the exact age differences in my family as well. So it was really cool to see that. I had a little brother named Santi, and we used to play all the time, and he taught me words in Spanish, and I would teach him English, and we were learning colors and numbers in English. And every time he has a new student that comes to stay with his family, he learns something else. So we're hoping in the next 10 years we can teach Santi English kind of through the different students that are coming in and out of the family. But they took really good care of me, and they would always make food for me, and they would take me on trips, and they would guide me around. They would show me how the bus worked and how to get money and where the stores were. And they were just very helpful, and I really learned a lot about Costa Rica and the way that they live and how they interact and the way that they view community and things like that through my family. So it was very impactful for me to get to know them. I'm still in contact with all of them. I still text my mom every couple weeks. I'm still on, Instagram and Snapchat with my sister and my older brother. And then I'll FaceTime my mom and my little brother every month or so just to check in and see how they're doing. Even though it's been about 2 years since I lived there, I'm still in contact with them. So it's very safe to say that it wasn't just a 4-month experience that I kind of left behind. It was definitely, these people became a part of my life, and looking forward very much to go back and see them and hang out with them. And then I think this is my last slide of my whole family together. And then on the right-hand side was me at Longo Mine, which was another community that we visited at the very, very beginning of my time in Costa Rica. So it's kind of the beginning and the end pictures of my time in Costa Rica. And it was just really a great experience all around. And it's really hard to kind of encapsulate all of the things that I learned, both academically, spiritually, personally, and all the different ways that I've grown. It's really hard to put all of that into just one slideshow, but it was really a fantastic experience. I think everybody should kind of travel internationally like that and just kind of live in a community like that and just get a different world perspective and a different world view. Definitely changed my life, definitely changed my vocational path, and it was just one of my favorite trips, one of my favorite things that I've ever done in my whole life, pretty much. But that's definitely the majority of my slideshow. If anybody has any questions or ever wants to talk about it a little bit more with me, I would love that. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you.
I do have one. When you said you would walk the kids home and you'd check if their houses were safe, well, what choices or authority or whatever you had to change anything?
I
So their
personally
house
didn't
wasn't
have any
safe.
authority. I personally didn't have any authority to say or do anything, but I was kind of a reporter to my supervisor. So there were a few students that she was worried about if they were going to their house or other houses. Because we had students of all ages, from ages 5 to ages 16. So we were very worried about, especially the kids that were about 10 to 14, that were still very impressionable, still trying to decide whether they were going to stay in our program or they were going to go off and either start working or other things that they could get themselves into, sometimes trouble. So I was basically eyes on the ground, just kind of supervise where they're going and making sure that they're staying in a safe environment as much as possible. And I would report back to my supervisor what I saw and who I saw.
Thank you.
So that was a very unique experience for me as well.
Do you remember like your first couple days? Like were you really excited, freaking out, scared? What were some of the harder adjustments for you?
I definitely had a hard time. Well, I had a hard time at first because my flight had gotten changed. So I had a 4.5-hour flight delay. So I didn't get there until 2 in the morning. And then with my flight change, they forgot my luggage. So I didn't have my suitcase for about 6 days. So not only was I in a foreign country, I kind of spoke the language and I could get by, but I really wasn't fluent. I didn't have any of my clothes. I didn't know this family I was staying with. I was borrowing clothes, and it was very overwhelming my first few days. But my family really helped to make me feel comfortable. They took me back and forth to the airport 3 different times, trying to figure it out with me. And they were just very patient, very kind, very compassionate. And I'm very thankful for the family that I had and kind of the time and effort that they put into our relationship. So it took me a while to get used to it. It took me a while to get used to kind of the community and how things kind of roll. There's a stereotype of like Tico time, where everyone's just kind of on their own kind of time clock and everything's a little bit slower. Everything's a lot more intentional. And so I'm a very punctual person of like, I have to be here at this time, 10 minutes early. And there would be times where class would end 40 minutes late. And that's just kind of how it works. Or we'd stop and have coffee. And those were some things that were harder to get used to, because that's nothing that I can change about my environment. I can't change the timing. I can't change meetings and other people. So that was a little frustrating at first, but it was really important for me to have those kind of cognitive dissonance moments of this is different and I don't know why, because it made me process and reflect a lot more about what I was going through and how those little things kind of added up to my experience.
What did they want to know the most about you or your background, living, America, whatever?
They loved to see pictures of snow, which was one of the most, like, the coolest thing to them, because they'd never seen snow. So they loved to see those pictures. And then me personally, they always loved to hear me sing, because I'm a musician and I was in a band and I was in Sweetwine. And so they would always be like, hey, will you sing this song for us in English? Or will you sing this song in Spanish? And they would invite people over to the house and they'd be like, listen to my daughter sing. And I would like just get off the hour and a half like bus ride back from work and they're like, sing for 20 strangers that you don't know. It was always an interesting kind of environment, but they were just very kind and generous people.
I don't think we tested it on mics. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
It's a small, silly question, but on page 3 or so of your slides, one of your first group photos, was that Chris Bean?
Yes, it was Chris Bean. He was the one that was student teaching internationally. He was there with us pretty much the whole time. I think he got there 2 weeks before we did and left about a week before we did.
Okay.
But he was near us. He was about an hour away. So we would kind of meet up and have cohort meetings. He would go on weekend trips with us, but we didn't get to see him day in, day out. But he was there with us and it was awesome.
I had missed that whole experience of his. Yeah, for others, he was one of our physics majors and is now a high school physics teacher somewhere in the area.
Yep, he was the only student that I know of, definitely the first at VU to do an international student teaching internship. So he's an awesome kid. Great guy.
Maddie, you talked
So
about—
it is about 12:30, so I do have to run in just a minute, but I can answer another question if you have one.
I was just going to say super quick, you talked about, different aspects of the experience changing your vocational path. And I know like your majors led you there, so you were already like, interested. So what shift do you think you felt in your vocational path? Maybe a big question.
I've definitely told myself the past few years that I wanted to do international missionary work and kind of be a hands-on, feet on the ground, kind of ground zero, hands-on person. And that's really where I saw myself. And in some ways I do see myself still doing that, but I've really focused more on how am I going to make lasting change and things like that. So I was thinking more about like policy and protocol and kind of international, maybe government work or diplomacy or things like that. Something that'll have more of a systemic and structural effect than just a hands-on effect, which is just as important. But it definitely kind of opened my eyes to see the different ways that I could take this into a career. So, yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. If anybody wants photos or wants me to share the slides, I definitely will. But unfortunately, I do have to run to work. But
Thank you.
thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Gives us a taste.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Have a great day. Okay, I think now I'm going to stop the recording. Is that all right, Pastor?
Yeah.